Welcome to Leading Veterinary Teams, the podcast for people-first leaders in veterinary medicine who are ready to ditch the burnout script and lead with purpose. I'm Suzanne Thomas, veterinary technician, executive coach, and fellow leader in the trenches. Around here, we talk real-life leadership, boundaries, influence, team culture, and what it actually takes to build happy, high-performing hospitals. No fluff, no guilt, just the truth, some tools, and maybe a little tough love. If you're ready, let's get into it. Today on Leading Veterinary Teams, I'm joined with Sharon Vaturi, a registered veterinary technician with more than 20 years in the field, a scientist with a master's in biology, a teacher, and a musician. She's worked hands-on in patient care, trained teams, and stepped into leadership roles, and now runs RVT Seminars, where she focuses on improving patient care, culture, and team morale through teaching and mentorship, and is a motivational speaker focusing on improving company culture in veterinary medicine. We're going to dive today into what it really means to step up when you're on your own and how you can find clarity and confidence even when support feels really far away. But before we get into that, Sharon, first of all, welcome. I'm really intrigued by how leaders describe themselves, and you describe yourself as not only an RVT and a scientist, which makes sense, right? You describe yourself as a teacher and a musician. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So many aspects. I spent some time teaching as well. I'm a musician in a musical duo currently. We actively perform mostly original music out in the Los Angeles area, which has been amazing. With my teaching, I love being able to find how people learn. Everybody learns in a different way. I was trying to figure out why I enjoyed that so much, and I figured out it's because I love puzzles, and figuring out how people learn is a puzzle. What's really more fun for me, I have recently launched my motivational speaking business where I will be doing keynote concerts, which I will be focusing on improving company culture in veterinary medicine through the use of motivational speaking, integrating live music into those talks. There will be stories, lessons, some important content pieces on how we can help build a happy, healthy culture in veterinary medicine.
That is really interesting. I think that actually recently was watching something. It wasn't obviously called that, but it was something where they were talking about listening to whatever content you were consuming as well as watching it, and how people with certain I have ADHD, so people with certain neurodiversity actually learn better when they, let's say, are reading something and also listening to the audiobook at the same time and things like that. So it's interesting to me here that there's different ways to learn, and you can combine music and maybe didactic learning at the same time that can maybe help people. It's really interesting. I think the brain is so fascinating.
Yes.
So you have all of these different identities, right? There's the RVT, there's the teacher, the scientist, the musician. You have all of these different identities. Is there one that you feel shows up more when you're under pressure, when you're leading?
I found that I tend to do really well under pressure. I do better under pressure. I think a lot of that comes from my background in emergency. Most of my experience working as a technician has been in emergency. And there have been so many instances where when an emergency comes in or something happens, either in the clinic or in life, there's an emergency that happens. I hyper focus. I'm very good at that point in time in delegating, making sure everything gets done in a very efficient manner. If there's not an emergency going on, or if it's not a life or death decision that needs to be made, I freeze up What do you want for dinner tonight? I don't know. I can't make those decisions. But if something's dying, okay, all right, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're here. And it's fascinating in that way how the mind works. When panic mode, people get into fight or flight mode, right? I am
Yeah.
100% focused in those moments. And I'm so grateful that I have that and that I work
Yeah.
with some people that have that as well. It's such an amazing ability.
Yeah.
And I wish that it could be taught. I think it can be trained a bit once you get into those situations more. So if you have the opportunity to put people in those situations, and I think a big part of that, honestly, is training. So many people lack the opportunity for training, especially for something like CPR. A lot of clinics don't train on that. A lot of clinics don't train on anything, unfortunately. But with CPR, I love when I hear the stories of managers that will see when things are going on in the back. They have a stuffed dog or one of those critical care Jerry's they throw on the table, code! And they
Yeah.
get in there and have their teams practice that. And even if you are one of those people who don't necessarily, I will say, quote unquote, don't do well under pressure, when you do the thing enough times, start to get that muscle memory and you get used to it. So I definitely think there is a very important aspect to training where we can overcome our instincts of shutting down.
Yeah, and I would say CPR is a really great example when we're talking clinically. And I think that for people that, like you and I, who are credentialed technicians that were once on the floor and then have moved into a leadership role, which is the story for a lot of people, there's this training or learning gap that we have when we've spent so much time on the floor. And now we're faced with these conversations that we have to have that we have never had to have before. And they're mildly uncomfortable. And because we've never had to have them, it's just like that stat that comes in that we've never experienced. We've never had a CPR in front of us. We've never had to have a conversation with somebody that we don't know how to do this. We don't have the words. And so I just recently had a conversation with a manager and I had to walk her through how to have one of those conversations. And I talked to her through it, and she said to me, she was like, "You came here a couple of weeks ago and we went through something similar. And that first conversation was really hard, but then I had a couple more and it's not so hard anymore." I was like, "Yeah, it's called practice, right? It's the same thing. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be." So it's interesting when we're so accustomed to the tactical stuff that we don't always realize it's the same thing. It's just not hands on. It's the same theory though, right?
And the thing with that, it's so interesting because we spend so much time in the veterinary field focusing on those technical hands-on skills. We don't get training on how to communicate, how to run a business, all of these things that are considered soft skills that are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It comes naturally for some people, but for a lot of people, it doesn't. That's one of the things that I like to focus on with my training because I have some workshops that focus specifically on client communication, but in those workshops, I do help in how to communicate within and between teams as well. So it's not only client focused, it's an overall communication styles, what's a good way to communicate. But especially in leadership positions, I definitely remember some of those early things that happen. And I just, it was weird because I guess I'll call it, I panicked in a different sort of way. My
Yeah.
first week working as a veterinary hospital manager, my technician supervisor and one of the receptionists both come walking into the office screaming at each other. I honestly, I wasn't sure if it was a test to see
Okay.
how I would
Yeah.
react.
Yeah.
Everyone there knew that I hadn't had a hospital manager position. I had been in supervisory ish roles. I had been working at that clinic doing relief once a week or every other week for several months. So the team knew me. It wasn't like I was
Yeah.
coming in new and completely this random person. I froze. I had no idea what to do. I
Of
closed the
course.
door after them so other people didn't hear them.
That was good.
So okay, so at least, because the office was right there behind the reception desk where the clients are.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember the outcome of that. This was back in 2019, but I just still remember I was so shocked that these people would be yelling like this, just walking through the clinic screaming at each other. And this was apparently not the first time, nor had it been the last, but we did end up having a lot of conversations with both that receptionist and the technician supervisor. This is one of the issues we have in veterinary medicine. A lot of people in leadership positions do not want to be in leadership positions. They want the pay of the
Yeah.
leadership position because there's nowhere else to go. You hit
Right.
your peak as a technician. What's next? Oh, tech supervisor, hospital manager. I think
Yeah.
that's where we see a lot of these issues with poor management because you have
Hmm.
people in these positions that A, are not good at managing people, or B, are just there because they want the income and don't really care otherwise. When you get
Yeah.
those two things in one person, that was the situation with this technician supervisor. And don't get me wrong, she was a phenomenal technician. She was really great at that, but she was not a good people manager. But also, I don't feel she was getting very good support in her
Yeah.
leadership
And that's
role.
And that's what I was going to ask too. I challenge that there is no other space other than management, but I understand that is where people tend to go because they don't know what is available to them. I also challenge the fact that people that then go into management just maybe do it for the money. But I think there is always going to be a level of that. But I think where I would lean in is that a lot of times managers quote unquote suck because they don't have the support. I think if there was more support, more training, more help in the transfer from you are the best technician on the floor, so we're going to give you the manager role. And really, if people understood what that meant and they had more support and hand holding through that process. So we started this kind of at the top of this call with you saying that there's people don't understand the business, right? There's so much information on the business, right? Like you can Google how to run a business, and yet we still don't know how to run a business in vet med, right? Like it's wild to me that there's so much information about how to run a business. I can go on ChatGPT and ask to explain a P&L, whereas to ask ChatGPT to or Google how to manage this very complex, nuanced situation with these people that just came into my office screaming at each other is so much more difficult. And for me, I feel like if we are really going to set people up for success, there needs to be more than just, hey, you're a really great technician, you're the manager today. There needs to be more like preemptive planning and training and growth plans, not just that reactive, we need a manager, you're the best person in this team, so you should do it.
Definitely that nurturing aspect of growth for sure, mentorship.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be those people, but I just have a hard time believing that the majority of people coming into the leadership roles now, maybe the people that were in leadership roles or like existing, right? We're like, yeah, I'll be a manager because I'm going to make more money that way. But I think that people are starting to realize that leadership is more than that, and it's a huge responsibility. And yeah, I don't know.
I definitely agree with you. So I should have specified that most people in the field most technicians in the field feel the only way to go up is to go into management for
Yeah.
that extra pay. I should have made that. So that definitely a very good point that you made. I love the fact that there are more people having those leadership communications, more people having those interactions and speaking out about communication, empathy, support. It's so refreshing, honestly, because I was becoming disillusioned with veterinary medicine. Honestly, I've been in so long. It's been almost 25 years since I've been in the field. And we keep having more and more things that we can do, more things available to us to provide better patient care. And it's getting worse, at least out in
Mhm.
Southern California in the clinics where I've been working. And it's so upsetting because I'm doing a lot of relief shifts still at emergency and specialty hospitals. The lack of training programs is appalling. When I'm
Yeah.
there, thankfully, I'm there regularly enough. The team members there feel comfortable with me. They come to me with questions. I always give everybody my phone numbers. Like, you have any questions? I don't care if it's 3 in the morning because I don't sleep anyway. We just had that conversation and didn't have that background before.
Yeah.
That would have shut him down, and he probably never would have wanted
100%.
to ask me, possibly other
Or
people,
anyone. Yeah.
anything ever
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And so I feel bad, but I feel that it's a really solid example of when you have psychological safety in the workplace.
Yeah.
So I feel good
And
about
it's
that.
so, and you should. It's interesting because it is a great example because it shows psychological safety, I think, in a way that I don't know that people think about it. I think that people think psychological safety in a way that, like, I have to tell you something that's really scary or like really personal, or that wasn't personal, right? That was just like him feeling safe enough to ask for help in something that there wasn't a big deal, right? That was just a big deal to whom? Maybe to him that was a big deal. But for some people, because everybody's different, right? But for some people that would have been like, oh, what's the big deal? But for him that could have been huge. And I think that it outlines how important psychological safety is, and also how we don't know how small or large the situation can be, that how impactful that could be in any kind of situation. And we're talking asking for help to learn how to use a microscope versus something that could be really big, right? Because he feels safe enough to ask you about a microscope, you're likely going to also have that safety around a larger topic, but you've been able to build that safety around the smaller topic. And I think that it just goes to show that, anyone who is trying to figure that out, those smaller things are really important too. So don't discount that and think, oh, what's the big deal? Because it is. And those things compound and they matter. So I think it's a really good example.
Yeah.
So you should be proud of yourself. That's great.
Thanks. I just want to help people.
I know. And it is, to your point though, going back to microscopes, it is very interesting. And not just microscopes. I think sometimes we take for granted the knowledge that we have. I oversee a bunch of clinics in my current role, and some of our clinics have some older equipment, and we have some X-ray machines that are not digital. And I personally come from specialty medicine, so I will be the first person to tell you that I have been spoiled and I've only ever physically used digital X-ray in a clinic. I learned how to do the other ways
Dip
with
tanks.
film. I've learned how to do it
But you
the
didn't have
older
this, you
way,
didn't experience the smell.
but I did not experience that in clinic. I did it in a very controlled environment in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have dip tanks. We have CR in a couple of clinics. And so I have some recently, they're all starting to die because they're old. And so I have some situations where my hospital managers are reaching out to me and they're asking me questions or they're sending me stuff. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. but I don't understand any of this. And it's just funny, right? Because we take for granted some of the info. They're like, oh, this, and they're explaining to me the how long it takes to process the film, and I'm just like, oh my god, that's awful. So now I'm advocating to fix this stuff and all that, and so it's just interesting on that respect. But then also we think about a microscope. Like to me, I'm like, that's so easy. You turn it and you do this, you know, the thing, and like whatever, and then you do that, and then you like, and you put the thing back on it, and you turn it off. But then there's other people that look at it like, what's this? It's like somebody
Panic.
who's never seen an iPhone before, and it's, I don't know how to use this thing. I don't know what the voice was, but like,
It was
you
perfect.
know. But it's interesting to me that we take for granted the knowledge that we have, and we forget that it's taken us whatever it is that we did to learn that knowledge. So those people that are coming in that are new don't necessarily have that knowledge. It's kind of the point where I was trying to get there. They don't necessarily have that same experience that we have. So we have to teach them, and that takes time. And we're always rushing and trying to get things done. Sometimes we have to pause and slow down to go forward.
Right. And that's another big thing that I've been seeing in the clinics a lot that's been really upsetting to me is the assistants and technicians that don't want to train or teach other people because I don't get paid enough for that. It's not in my job description. And to those people, I say, have you actually read your job description? Because almost every single one says, and other tasks as assigned. Every single one I've ever seen. So technically, it's in your job description. But that's beside the point. The point is, why wouldn't you want them to know? It makes your life easier. If you can teach someone else to do something, especially if it's something you don't like doing, you teach them and then they can do it. And for those people who are gatekeeping and thinking that because they're the only person in that clinic that knows how to do that thing, they can't get rid of you. So you're not going to teach anybody else because then your job is at risk. I hate to break it to those people, but when you put yourself out there in a way where you're supporting your team and you're helping build your team, you become a more valuable asset.
100%.
They can replace you. They can find someone else. There are a bunch of trainers and people out there that can teach you how to do things. Any piece of equipment you have in your lab, you've got your reps, you've got the manufacturing companies. They can send someone out to teach you to do any of the things.
Yeah.
And the thing is, some people aren't good at teaching. And if that's the case, that's okay. You help that person, maybe guide them toward a trainer or a resource that might be helpful. But this whole attitude of, I'm not going to help because whatever your excuse, it makes me really sad because we really should be building each other up and helping each
Yeah.
other. Because when we do that, not only does that remove burden from both of the people involved, but it helps remove burden from everyone else on the team. It helps improve patient care. It helps improve the client experience. And honestly, at the end of the day, when all those things are going right, you help improve the bottom line of the clinic, which if the clinic is doing better, hopefully that results in people getting raises and getting paid a little more appropriately. There's no downside to teaching people things.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that people are scared, and they're scared that they're going to become dispensable if they give up whatever they know. And at the end of the day, the leadership knows that's actually the opposite, right? I want the people that are going to teach all of the things, because what happens if you get hit by a bus? I need other people to know what's in your brain, because I'm in trouble if nobody else knows what's in your brain as the leader, right?
And I
But
love that example, the hit by bus. I used it just yesterday. I had some people like to try to get me to say the words, I promise I will do something. I refuse to use that because so you could, if you really tried, I'm like, hit by bus. You don't know. And I would say, I will get it done or I will do my best, but I won't use the word I promise for that exact reason, for the hit by bus reason, because you never know what's going to happen. And that's why
yeah,
it's so important to document everything, to share knowledge and to teach and to be supportive of each other, because that way we can all be there for each other and make sure that everything continues to flow smoothly.
yeah. For sure. Now, you mentioned that you obviously had a pretty traumatic first experience as a new leader, right? With these two people coming in your office and screaming and whatnot. Talk to me a little bit about how that experience was as a hospital manager, knowing that because you didn't really have a whole lot of support and backup. So, how was that experience having to do that alone?
I learned so much. I was at this clinic for a total of 13 months. When I first started working there, as I mentioned, I did relief work there as a technician. It was a husband wife owner of a private practice. The husband owner kept asking, "How can we get you here full time?" I said, "Practice manager. I can't afford to be here full time as a technician because I had a
Yeah.
better paid job at the time in research. And I was just staying on the floor because I didn't want to lose my skill set I've been building for at that point 20 years.
Yeah.
And every time he asked me, I gave him the same answer. One day I get a phone call. "Hey, how would you like to interview for the position of practice manager?" I got excited. And then I said, "Is Karen okay?" She'd been there for, I can't remember, it was 29 or 31 years at this clinic as the practice manager. She gave them 8 days notice.
Oh gosh.
And she was okay. That was the main thing because that was my big concern. Is she okay?
Yeah.
She was fine. She was just tired of the drive and wanted to work closer to home, which is totally understandable.
Sure.
I was able to overlap a couple shifts with her to get some of the training under my belt. And she was very helpful in that way, which was great. It was going to be between me and one other person. And they said it was close between me and this other person. But since I already knew the team, since I'd been working there, that's why they picked me over the other person. Because neither of us had prior hospital manager experience. I felt it was such an uphill battle. I was definitely able to get a lot of things done. I learned a lot about P&L statements, doing numbers, dealing with collections. I thankfully was already really experienced with client interactions, both positive and negative. So I did really well there. I actually had one of the doctors one day, she gave me the best compliment ever, I think, in the veterinary field. She called me the client whisperer. And that made me feel really good. We had a client who was super
That.
angry about his cat. The doctor who was on it was a newer doctor with us and in the field. And she was not very confident in herself or her recommendations. And his cat was a bit spicy. He mentioned, she mentioned to the owner that we wouldn't be able to do a full physical exam. Something was wrong with this cat's mouth, so it had to be sedated to do a full oral exam. We don't usually use the word cat whisperers to clients. She used that term. He was just getting very upset with the way that she was explaining things, and he was very angry. She walked out of the room. I asked her what was going on. She explained everything in detail, and then I asked her, "What if he'll let you do whatever you want? What do you want from him today? What do you want to do with the cat?" "Sedate, oral exam, go from there." Great. I went, had the estimate. I went and spoke with him. He said, the doctor said, "Hop up."
He's always barking.
Happy dog, happy dog. The client said that the doctor said all these things and that I need a cat whisperer and all these things. And I said, "I completely understand. I am one of those people. I am comfortable dealing with cats that are a little averse to being handled. If we're able to do this today, where we can do a mild sedation on your cat, do a full physical exam, see what's going on in the mouth, are you okay with us doing that?" We had a really good conversation. I answered all of his questions. It took a while. I was in there for a while, but he had a lot of questions, and rightfully. By the time I walked out of there, he was smiling. When the doctor walked back in after with the results of the exam from Spicy Cat, he was all smiles. He said thank you, and he walked out the door. It just goes to show that and again, this won't be with every case, but communication, the way we communicate, the words that we choose to use, our body language, all of these things together really can shape the way that our client interactions go.
Yeah.
I had several more clients like that come and go in my time there. With me learning new things in that leadership position, the wife owner, it was her dad who owned the clinic before, and he was a veterinarian, so she inherited it. Both her and her
Okay.
husband were business people. They were not veterinary people. She knew enough because she grew up in the field, basically in that clinic. The reception manager had been there 2 years less than the hospital manager that was there prior, so almost 30 years. She and everyone else were just so used to going to the wife owner to ask questions. The goal of the owners were to take a step back from the clinic. They didn't want to be in there. They just wanted to make the profit and let the clinic run. And this was one of the questions I'd asked them during my interview. So I knew that this was the case. There were a couple times where I told the wife owner, I told her, I understand that everyone's comfortable coming to you for things. If you truly want to take a step back, you need to send them to me instead. Our desks, literally, our chairs were side by side. It was not go to another office or the other side or anything like that. You need to tell them, go to Sharon for this. That's going to do two things for you. Number one, I get to learn the things because, yes, I'm going to turn right around and ask you because I still need to learn those things. But number two, it gets
Right.
them used to coming to me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then doesn't do it. That had happened a couple of times. There were several times where I had tried doing things and making changes to help make it easier for them to step back. There were even two separate occasions where I pulled the husband owner aside and I told him, like, look, this is a really financially stupid thing for me to say to you. But if you're not going to let me do my job, you're wasting money paying me. And he understood. And I gave him the examples of what the things were at the time. And things would get better for a month or two. First time it was about 2 or 3 months. It was better. Second time, maybe a month. But they just couldn't let go. And I understand
Yeah.
that. It's been their baby for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's hard to step back. And I understand that. Another major issue that I found was that the husband and wife were not on the same page.
Mm.
The husband would tell the team member something and they would just say, okay, and then would go to her and tattle on him basically. And she's, no, that's stupid. Don't do that.
So they played mom and dad.
It was
Yeah.
awful. And so I had to take her. I said, we need to have a conversation. This was toward the end of my time there. We need to have a conversation offsite. So we went to lunch somewhere a couple blocks away. And I told her, I know it's really uncomfortable, but you and your husband really need to get on the same page. You need to show a uniform front in how you're presenting things to the team. There should be no direct anything from either of you without a discussion from both of you. First, if a question is asked, let me think about it, go discuss it together. And so you both have the same story going forward. A big reason there's issues here is because of this rift between the two of you. I don't know if they were having issues at home or other issues. Not my
Yeah.
problem, not my business.
Yeah.
My business and my problem is to make sure the clinic runs smoothly.
Yeah.
We had, unfortunately, it was a really unhealthy work environment there. The doctors would yell at the teams on the floor. The tech and reception managers would yell on the floor at team members. I had to pull them aside. Not the doctors, the owners dealt with the doctor's side of that. I brought it up every time it happened. But with the tech and reception supervisor, I would pull them in. And with the tech supervisor, the one that was not great at the people managing, but with great tech skills, she was slowly getting better. I had discussed with the owners sending her away to a retreat to try to help her be more in control of her emotional outbursts. She would take everything very personally. I learned a lot about people management for sure. I've always been one of those lead from the front people. Even there, I spent a lot of time on the floor and helping and going to everybody every single day. Hey, how's it going today? We had a small team, so I was able to do that. Understand people with
Yeah.
70 and 100 people teams can't do that. But we had 20, 25 people fully employed. And I would stop and ask them, hey, how you doing today? And if most of them would say, okay, some of them would tell me if they weren't. But if one of them would say, I'm okay, but I felt that they weren't, later that day I would pull them aside and like, hey, just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure you seem a little off. I'm here if you want to talk about it. And thankfully, most of them felt comfortable enough with me to share. And I was able to help a lot of them in that way, which I felt really fortunate for. The other thing that I found was really important was just giving people praise, just saying thank you. One of my favorite examples was one of the guys that was working there. He was newer to the field, veterinary assistant. We all know how cleaning goes in most clinics. It could be better.
Sure.
This clinic, we had the glass jars with the Clorox and alcohol gauze squares in it. And he had actually pulled everything out and he was thoroughly scrubbing as opposed to just topping it off and putting more stuff in there. And I walked by and I saw that and I said, hey, thank you. And he's for what? It's like, for doing that properly. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just doing my job. I was like, I know, and I appreciate it. And he just brightened up. And
I'm like, thank you for thanking him.
that's the thing is we don't thank people enough in this field. And even I understand if it's a code, again, you're running CPR, you don't have time
Yeah.
to say thank you for someone handing you a drug. But outside of that, if somebody hands you something, it doesn't take any time to say thank you. My default is thank you, I appreciate you. That's just my
You
default.
can say thank you after.
You can,
You can't,
absolutely.
it's hard to say thank you while you're in the middle of the thing, right?
Yeah.
But there's no reason why you can't say thank you after. I think to your point in that is that, like, the thing that comes up for me is that, yes, say thank you, but it doesn't always have to be for the big thing. it you said thank you for something that he is expected to do. Like, you said thank you for he was doing his, and he responded in the, what are you thanking me for? I'm just doing my job. Those are the things, again, like we said before, that compound. They are important. That's what creates the psychological safety. That is what creates that emotional bank account with those people that allows them to then feel like, oh, this person cares about me. The fact that you went and checked in on them daily. And I agree, when you have a larger team, you can't necessarily check in on everyone daily, but you surely can weekly.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, if you have a larger team, you have put yourself on the schedule so that you overlap everybody at some point.
Ideally.
I don't know about you, but I used to work overnights and I never saw my manager ever. And when I became a manager, it was my duty to make sure that I always overlapped my team at some point, because I don't think that leadership should be completely absent. Because for me, when I worked overnights, there was always the overnight team versus the day team. Why? Because there's no leadership on the overnight team ever. And if there was, maybe there would have been a little bit less of that, because then there would have been somebody who could have been like holding us accountable for the shit talking that was happening.
I absolutely agree. And to deal with those complicated client cases or other things that need a manager there,
Yeah.
before I took that job as a manager, I was actually in the process of interviewing for a Blue Pearl position. Their first clinic they were opening in California, up in Daly City near San Francisco. It was a 24-hour facility with 20 doctors and probably 100 plus staff. And I was like, I was excited about it because I knew I had other practice managers that I knew that I had a support system outside, and they said that they would support me as well, which, can take hit or miss. But I worked for a Blue
Yeah.
Pearl before, so I actually knew people who were in management for Blue Pearl, which was helpful.
Yeah.
And during my interview process, that was one of my things that I said, because it was a 24-hour facility, emergency and specialty. I stated that I would make it a point to make sure to be there for some overnights, some swings, and some days, because I know, because I work mostly overnights, that
Yeah.
management is never there and most people don't feel supported. So for me, it was extremely important for the overnight people, because it's not just the lack of management. It's even when clients bring in goodies, or if there's a holiday and management brings stuff in, it's
Oh, yeah.
the overnight people just get all the leftovers and the
If
end
that.
bits if they're lucky.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
really bothers me. I never felt personally bothered by it, but it bothered me that members of my team were bothered by it. I don't,
Same.
right. So I don't like people feeling rejected, slighted,
Yeah.
ignored, like they don't matter, and
Yeah.
all those things. When I was working overnights, still, when I work overnights, even though we don't have management, I tend to take on that role anyway. So if there's a spicy client or anything like that, I remember when I was working for Blue Pearl back when I was living in Virginia, there were quite a few nights where the default of the team, like, oh, let's call the manager. And I said, we don't need to wake her up at 3 o'clock in the morning for this. This is ridiculous. Let me try to have this conversation with this client. And 95% of the time, I would say I was able to resolve it. And the rest, still, we didn't need to call the manager. Leave a note. They can deal with it in the morning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like to respect people's time, because managers are people too, and they need to sleep sometimes. But if there's a way you can handle it, it's so easy for us to shift blame and responsibility. We seem to like to do that a lot in the veterinary field. Not my problem. I don't want to deal with it. I don't care. That person did it. And that's the same thing when going over estimates, because one of the workshops that I offer specifically focuses on going over estimates and treatment plans with clients. I found so many differences in the way estimates are done. One of my biggest things is I feel very strongly that the person who goes over the estimate with the client should initial or sign it, not for blame, but for accountability. If there was an issue, and it doesn't have to be an issue with that, hey, do you remember when talking with this client, this part of the conversation? And again, it should be coming from an angle of understanding and trying to improve our process, not from, oh, there was a problem with this, you're in trouble, I'm going to write you up. It, again,
Yeah.
does that show support? Does that show training? Does that show good communication? No, it shows none of those things. It shows that something bad happened and we need to blame someone. So someone's going to get a write up or someone's going to get fired over this. And it's just really upsetting, because, again, we should be supporting each other and finding ways to improve not only ourselves, but our processes as well.
And to that end, for me, I've worked in clinics where we, when I worked in the specialty emergency clinic, we had our whoever did the estimates. When I was an oncology technician, we always had to sign the estimates
Mhm.
that we went over. And it was honestly, it was so that we knew who was the person who had the conversation with the owner, so that if there was ever a question about, if the owner had a question, like we knew who to talk to, right? It was, yes, for accountability, but also our team was so big that if I asked, if a client was calling and they asked Kathy didn't know because she wasn't involved in that case. I knew because I was the one who discharged them. So it made more sense to ask me because I had that conversation with the owner. And so it, for us, at least, we did that because it made more sense to know who to talk to,
Follow
you know?
ups for sure.
So obviously there was also, if there was an issue, then who do you talk to? You talk to the person who had that conversation. Most often it was just to verify what the client said or what you said to the client so that we can put the whole story together, but it was never a finger point. That was never the point of it. And to that end, it's the same reason why you sign that you counted the meds, right? Like why you have double signatures so that you can go back and say, hey, you signed this off. And so that there can be some accountability there. So I completely agree.
That's another
Yeah.
pet
Oh,
peeve
yeah.
of mine. Doubling, double
Yeah.
checking meds, because nope, the double checker at most places don't double check. They just put their initials on it. I will not. Every time I ask them to keep the bottle out, or I'll pull the bottle that's open. I will look at it, double check it's the right drug. I will open it to make sure the meds look the same. Check expiration date, patient, the instructions make sense. Most
Well,
people
when you have a that you've been involved in that there is a mistake, you whether it's a medication mistake or whatever, when you are personally involved in a situation, you tend to be more apt to follow through with those rules, right?
Mhm.
I find that the people that are just going through the motions because they're motions, like they don't have any emotion essentially attached to it, they are less apt to do it. So for me, when I see people that are not actually double counting, I try to tie it to something that they've experienced so they understand the reason behind it, right? Or I'll share with them a personal situation that I have actually experienced. And I will sometimes get like wildly gruesome so that they like have to feel what I felt. Like I will force them to have empathy
it'll
in the
sit better
situation
for
where
sure.
I'm like, no, you must know how this felt so
Feel
that
my
they will then
feelings.
so that they will then be like, okay, I will never do that because I never want to feel what you felt. And yeah, no, I had a medication error that traced back to me. I will forever deny that I was involved, but my name was on it and dispensed the wrong chemotherapy drug.
Yeah, that's
And
really rough.
after then, there was always a double signature because we were always anything ever dispensed was always double looked at. And from then on, every hospital I've ever walked into, I'm always like, so how do you guys
You're gonna do this.
know?
No, and it's great that you're able to do that. And it's so important. Learning is so important. And yes, you can learn from your own mistakes, but if you can learn from other people's mistakes, that's
Then we don't have to have the mistakes, right? There's reasons behind why SOPs are created. They're not just because we want to create problems for you or make things more difficult. Sure, it's a pain in the butt when you are short staffed and you need to go find somebody else to double count your meds. But there is a reason why we need to make sure these meds are double counted. I just happen to have a
absolutely.
pill bottle next to me.
Props are always ready. I Another really good point with that though is how frequently most people in the veterinary field do not explain the why, both to team members and to clients. We just say, you have to do these things. A really great example of that, which makes me very upset every time I think about it. One clinic where I was working, the doctor was sending home sucralfate, did not state to give on an empty stomach. Every other place I've worked, give on an empty stomach 1 hour before or 2 hours after a meal or any other medications. It wasn't on the label. And the doctors at this clinic made the labels and we just filled them and took them up front. I asked him about it. It's like, I don't know. I've been in research the last 2 years, although I've been working some relief, but maybe I missed something new with sucralfate. So I went and I asked him about it. He said, oh, no, I don't bother putting it on there because owners never listen anyway. You're feeling my feelings. It's, I can see that on your face. It upset me so much. Of course, I verbally told the owner to give it on an empty stomach 1 hour before or 2 hours after. The fact that his other clients didn't comply is most likely because he didn't explain why.
The why? Yeah.
Because if you don't explain why, it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you
Right.
understand the reason, you may as well not give the medication because it's not going to do its thing if you.
You're wasting your money.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the same holds true for so many things. When I was learning initially all my tech skills, I feel so fortunate that I was at a clinic where they didn't just show me how to do a thing. They showed me how they did it. They said why we were doing the thing, why they were doing it that way, how not to do it, what not to do, what to avoid, who else I should go watch do the same thing because they have another way to do it that might be better for how you like to do things.
Yeah.
I am so grateful that I have that. And I teach in the same way because, again, without that why, or in other cases, knowing that there's so many right ways to do the same thing, there's also so many wrong ways to do the
Sure.
same thing. But having that knowledge as to why is so central to everything else that we do, and health
And
and compliance.
and to that point, I think being open to and curious to asking more questions. I think so many times I walk in, especially in clinics that the people have been in the clinics and doing the same thing for so long that they stopped questioning things because this is just the way that we do things here. And when you do bring new perspective in, they start asking, like, why do you guys do it that way? And because I see so many, I walk into different clinics all the time, so I see different things all the time. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Why? And then they look at me like, why are you asking questions? And because doctor from that clinic did it this way, so I'm just curious, and I lean in with questions, but it's refreshing to them because they're like, nobody's ever asked me that. But I think that if we started to ask some more questions, we'd actually find that there are more ways to do things. There's different ways to lead. There's different ways to get answers from people. There's different ways to tape a catheter. I'm not going there, but there are different ways. We're not going to go into that, but there's different ways to do all the things. And you're absolutely right. There are wrong ways to do things. There are standards, but there are also different levels of standards. There's gold standard and there's all these different levels, and there's also laws that we should be following, and there's lots of people that don't follow them. But there's all these different nuances and things that, like, different training, if you went to Penn Vet, if you went to Ross, if you went to Cornell, like, all different things. And I think the first time that I really, like, in vet med, that really opened my eyes to how different things are is that I was working with one oncologist for 6 years, five and a half years. And then I worked with a different oncologist, and he had a different protocol. And I was like, wait. And then I texted my old oncologist, and she was like, yeah, that's not how I do it, but that's not wrong. And I was like, wait, there's another way to treat this? And I was just like, oh my God.
Everything I thought I knew, oh no. And I see
Right.
that.
But it's, oh yeah, like, I know that, but it's, oh yeah. And it's just be open to other ways of thinking, and not just for one section of your life. In all things, in medicine, in leadership, in communication, in all of it, ask more questions. Ask why.
Absolutely.
Why do you do that? Why do you think that? Why are you saying that? Why do you feel that way? Tell me more. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if you say something to me and like before, what did I say? I was like, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge that because I don't know how I feel that. Tell me more
Absolutely.
about that.
No,
You
absolutely. And
know?
I love having those conversations, and I love when people counter or ask why. A big conversation I've had with a lot of people is back to psychological safety. They're scared to ask why because they feel that it will come off accusatory. Are you asking why? Are you asking, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I haven't seen it done that way. Can you explain to me why you're doing it like that? So it's
It's the
how you're
tone,
coming.
the way it's said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know there are some people who it's challenging for them to ask questions in that way. They don't understand body language or tone very well. That's why it's so important to have a good, strong team, because if you have a team member that you trust, let's say that you want to ask a question, but you can run it by them first, someone who knows you better and knows that you have that challenge in your communication style or abilities. Because that way you can temper it a little bit, or maybe even have them ask the question if you feel they can do it in a more delicate manner. But for me, the biggest green flags in clinics is hearing people say, why? Or I don't know. Or could you please give me a hand with that? And then the response. That's the other one. The fact that people are comfortable making those statements or questions is really good. But then hearing those responses, I love when I see that collaborative effort of people wanting to help each other out. I've worked with some doctors who are very much, oh, let me walk you through everything I'm doing.
Yeah.
Or they'll ask a question. Perfect example with my cat. I took one of my cats in for her annual lab work, her urine came back with a raging bladder infection, like, loaded with bacteria. This is a weird one. So the doctor said, I know I probably don't have to ask you this, but did you change the needles after you're poking before putting it in the collection tube? And I said, yep. Okay, yeah, that's just really weird. And cat was completely asymptomatic. So it was very strange. But
Yeah.
it was, again, one of those things, a doctor that I've worked with before, so she's getting more comfortable with me. But there's been some statements that she made where I know that she's asking from a place of she wants to make sure patient care is really good, but she's worked with people who are less experienced, less skilled, and need to be told certain things. And I never take that personally because I feel very
Yeah.
strongly that over communication is so much better than not communicating thoroughly enough. I'd rather be told the same thing 20 times than not once and forget something, or, oh, maybe that's something I haven't
Yeah.
dealt with in a long time and I forgot this little nuance or something like that. So I love having open communication with my doctors and other team members for that reason.
Yeah. In that moment too, though, it's good because what if you forgot, or what if you like were doing something else and you actually didn't, right?
Distracted.
That would have been an answer for why this happened, and it wouldn't have been because you purposely did it because you do know better, but like you would have been like, oh my god, what an idiot, you know what I
Right.
mean?
People make
um
mistakes and we're all
right.
human. It happens. But
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to have a strong team so that you can double check each other and be there,
Right.
right? Catch. Because there's been a number of times I had another example where someone I didn't know very well, I'd worked with this person a few times. They had me double check medication they were pulling up and I watched them pull it up from the bottle, and bottle was right, volume was right. And then they start walking over to this pet. And I said, is that drug for that pet? Yeah, why? Can we double check that volume with the doctor? That seems like a really large volume of methadone for that cat there. If I had not had the experience I had with that medication, because I was the lead in a surgical specialty, we used methadone all the
Yeah.
time. But this
Yeah.
person was in emergency and they did not use it as frequently, and he was only working very part time. So of course we go back to the doctor, and the doctor can't remember if they said it wrong, and he couldn't remember if he heard it wrong. But either way, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the mistake was made, but it was caught before there was an issue because there was somebody double checking and people who are familiar with the medication. So just that, again, that double checking all aspects, right? Patient, right? Route, right? Dose, right? Medication, all of those things.
Yeah. And to that point, I'm going to also share or say that I think it's important that if you don't know, that you don't just say that you do, because I think that, and that also goes to your point of having a strong team, right? Because I think it's been a long time since I've been on the floor and in any real capacity, right? Like I do phlebotomy in almost every hospital that I walk into because I was an oncology technician. They all know that. And they're like, oh, she can
This is
poke
your
things.
specialty.
Right. But occasionally I'll be asked a question like a drug dosage, and the doctor is like, hey, can you verify this like buprenorphine dose? And I'm like, I can do the math. But if you're asking me if the range of dosage makes sense, I have absolutely no idea. Where's Plums? I don't know. I haven't looked at, I don't know. That is so far back there. I don't know. And I was an oncology tech, so we didn't use controlled drugs very often. Like, yes, it's somewhere, but I have my things that I can go find to get that information. I'm
Absolutely.
not one of the people that have that information just readily the top of mind. I can talk to you about vincristine and doxorubicin because that's still very much here. But I'm honest about that, right? I walked into a clinic more recently and they were doing a dental and the doctor needed help. I can monitor anesthesia. I was very clear. I was like, I'm happy to monitor anesthesia. I'm not scaling teeth. Sorry, never done it. Not going to do it. I'm sorry.
And that's how it should be. And the
I'm
fact
not
that
going
you're
to pretend like
comfortable.
I know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I'm pretend today just because I have an LVT at the end of my name does not mean that I came right out of school and was an oncology technician. I didn't
Right.
work in GP. I didn't do dentals. I didn't, we learned theoretically how to do them in school, but I never did them. So I'm not going to pretend like I know what that is.
Right.
I got to like polish once when I was a manager at a GP.
That's safer. You can do a lot less damage that way than stealing.
Right.
Mhm.
Like, but I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm doing. And I'm not, if you want to teach me, that is a totally different conversation. But let's talk about what's appropriate here on this owned dog. Probably not the right situation to do that today. So, like, I'm happy to monitor anesthesia for you. Right. And I was honest. I was like, I'm happy. I'm here. I'm happy to help you. But I think let's not put ourselves in situations where we are saying that we can do more than we can do. Let's be honest. Let's ask for help when we don't know. And that goes for leaders, that goes for techs, that goes for anyone, anywhere. Let's just be honest. And that goes back to your psychological safety, right? Because if that hasn't been created, then you're going to have trouble being honest. You're going to be in a whole lot more dirt if you are not honest, because everybody is in trouble if you are lying about what you can do.
Absolutely, and
So
I just had
saying that out
this.
loud.
No, I agree, and it's so important, and this is the thing, even without psychological safety, you still should not pretend you know how to do something you
Right.
don't. I picked up a relief shift. I had a friend of mine who's working at an emergency clinic. She texted me, it was like 1:30 in the morning. "Hey, I know this is a long shot, but can you come in and help us with a Euro abdomen? Because none of our on-call surgery techs are answering their phones right now." And I happened to be awake. I was like, "Sure, can I take a nap for half an hour first?" But anyway, I ended up getting over there and everything went smoothly. I had been there before doing relief shifts, so I knew the ER floor where most of the things were. I hadn't done surgery at the clinic before. But when the doctor was finishing up, he had placed a JP drain and asked me if I was comfortable suturing it in. And I said, nope, haven't done suturing in a really long time because my specialty where I was working, my doctor wouldn't let me suture anything. So I'm more than happy to learn if you want to teach me. So I'll show you
Yeah.
this time and you can do it next time. So I said, okay. And he walked me through it and he was really great about it, which was nice. But again, I'm not going to be like, I can probably figure it out. It's probably, I've done it before,
Right.
but even something I've done before, I'm too long. So I didn't want to do that. But I had the situation where, so the clinic where I was the lead surgery tech, I didn't come in that position, but their entire surgery team had exodus the Friday before.
Mm.
Two new of us started on Monday. I had one veterinary assistant who was working with the surgery team, so she knew their processes, but she didn't know how to do anything tech wise, which is completely fine. Her and I worked amazingly together. We're still great friends right now. I love working with her. She's one of my favorite people to work with, and she is just ambitious, detail oriented, amazing team player. This other person who started the same day as me had been a credentialed tech for 5 years. I had not done anesthesia in specialty before. I'd done emergency and I was okay. I knew when things weren't right and be like, hey, doc, something's not right here. And they would tell me how to fix it. But I was not super comfortable running anesthesia. I had actually wanted to be the emergency overnight shift lead, is what I wanted to do. But they're like, we could really use you in surgery. So I said, okay, sure. But because of my insecurity about myself, this other person who started on the same day with me seemed a lot more comfortable and confident. I found
Mm.
out after only a couple of weeks that it was just an act. She was one of those people that will never say, I don't know. Seeing evidence of that. And it was very clear to me about 2 months in when we had this recurring patient coming in that needed bandage changes daily to every couple of days. And we were finally at a point where we could take it off, but I was not available to discharge, so this other person discharged. The client called back later, specifically asking for me because she'd been only dealing with me up until that point. And this had been, again, a couple months of this pet coming in. And she asked me a question. It was a cat. she asked what to do if the cat's foot got dirty, because the bandage had been on the foot, but we were going to let it air out now. And the other tech that I was working with had said, "Oh, you can just brush the litter off, whatever." That was her response.
Oh my God.
Yes, that's the first step. That's fine. But you need a little bit more care for that, especially if it's a wound that's in the process of closing and healing right now. So thankfully, the client knew my name and felt comfortable with me and called me. So I was able to give her better guidance on care for her pet. But it was one of those things where she could have come to the back and she could have told the client, "I don't know, let me go ahead and check on you. Let me see what if the doctor has any special instructions for you," or something like that, which should have all been in the discharge instructions anyway. Different story, different conversation. But it was not the only evidence or instance where she had made statements without verifying. And that went with other technicians. Other technicians and assistants started telling me about some of the things that she just did that didn't quite seem right. So they wanted to check with me. She only stayed there for about 4 months. She left after about 4 months, but she was starting to have issues. She made a mistake in calculating a medication, which we all make mistakes, but she chose to go to someone outside the department to ask a question because she didn't feel safe in her department.
Yeah.
And the surgeon we were working with was notoriously screamy.
Mm.
She didn't feel safe there. She didn't want to talk to me because she was not a fan of mine for, I'm not sure what reasons. We never got to the bottom of it. We tried having conversations, but nothing ever resolved, which was very unfortunate. But she did finally come to me to ask me questions. She realized that she had made a mistake and she came. And of course, even though she had been verbal to other people about not liking me for whatever her reasons were at the time, she finally felt comfortable enough to come to me and ask for help, which I'm grateful that she did, because at the end of the day, we're all here for the patients. And I don't
Yeah.
care who I have to go ask a question to. I don't usually have issues getting along with people. I'm usually pretty easygoing, and most people get along with me and feel comfortable with me. And that's whether I'm doing relief or working full time. People come to me with questions. Again, as I mentioned, they'll text me in all hours of the day. I think this is what I'm supposed to do, but can you just verify for me? So yeah, absolutely. No problem. But the fact that she, after all that, had come back to me and was asking me this question, and I was like, yeah, sure. No attitude, just 100%. Yeah, let's go ahead and work this out together. Let's do it on paper and I'll verify this and we'll work everything out. And everything was good for the last few weeks until she shifted out to another clinic. It was really sad because one of the complaints that she made, which also helped me, because a lot of times when people act that way toward you, you try to look at yourself like, what did I do wrong? What did I do
Yeah.
to upset them? And one day she left crying. She said she had to go home early. And I found out that she had accused one of the other employees there of bullying her. Now, the thing is, this person that she accused was one of the absolute nicest people that I've ever met in my life. Like, completely sweet and all of these things. So at that point, I knew, I was like, okay, it's probably not me.
Yeah.
If she's having this issue with this person, nobody has issues with this other person. And
Yeah.
because she used the word bullying, it just made it seem very much like she was trying to gear up for a lawsuit using the word bullying, because it's a very specific term that's good to do that. And I don't know whatever came of that. I never heard anything after she left, but it just seemed like the things that she was doing and the things that she said were gearing up in that way. And I feel like I'm a little more tuned into that because I've been a manager at a clinic. And so you're looking for that, because I've had some of those issues as well. We had an employee when I was managing that injured himself on the job. That ended up getting really complicated and continued after I had left. I was
Mm.
instructed by the owners to not respond to any of his text messages or phone calls. And it seemed that he was basically trying to milk the system. When he came in, he had a bunch of medical issues already. the thing that happened, you could see either way. We have accidents all the time. He was in the X-ray suite with two other members of the team. He was trying to, from what I gathered, it looked like he was trying to instruct them on how to restrain this very oversized dog for X-rays, which the dog was obviously not a good candidate for training because it was thrashing. And the dog ended up hitting him, and his head ended up going up into the main part where the beam comes out. He was fine for the first hour, but then all of a sudden was not fine. And I understand that's how concussions and things work because I've had them before also, and they're not necessarily instant. And it take like 15 to 30 minutes before it starts really kicking in. And we were having a staff meeting, and then about halfway through was when he was like, oh, I don't feel good. Had to go to the doctor, but then he was out for a really long time. And they were trying to say that there was a bunch of other things that were caused by this because of his prior medical conditions. And it was a whole very complicated thing. But again, it was one of those things that I got to learn. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to the completion of it, and I wasn't super involved as much as I would have liked to have been, so that I could see how that process worked in terms of if somebody is suing a clinic for something like that. It's an unfortunate part of the business, but it is something that is important.
It's something that does happen. You're absolutely right. I think it's important to assume good intent, but it is also important to know how to handle those things when they happen, because they do.
Mhm.
Um, I think that this conversation could probably go on all day, and we might have to have another episode or something to continue the conversation. But I appreciate the conversation. I think it's been really great. I do want to respect your time. I do have one quick question that I've been asking everybody. If you had to rapid fire decide one book recommendation, what would you make sure that everybody read?
Oh man. Oh, that's a hard one.
It's always a hard one.
I just love reading so much. The Ghost Map.
Okay.
It is a story. It's not a story. It's a true story. And it's fascinating. And it actually has some roots back to veterinary medicine. This was about the guy so the big cholera outbreak, that was it cholera? Oh, I have the book right in the other room. Basically, it was how they first discovered epidemiological roots, how tracing a disease back to its source. And this was a well back in the UK. The Ghost Map tells the whole story about the background, about how sewage systems worked back in the day, disease spread and stuff like this. And I think the guy's name is Jon Snow, but I also know that there was another Jon Snow more recent that was like a whistleblower, but I think the guy's name was Jon Snow, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was just phenomenal because this was before we knew that there were microscopic organisms causing disease. This was still back in the realm of miasma and the toxic vapors are causing disease, and people in fresh air aren't going to get sick, but people in fresh air and people with money were still getting sick. And this guy didn't know why, but he knew that it was that well. And he had problems trying to get people to believe it. And so this is that whole story. What was a chapter in my epidemiology course textbook, it's in a whole book. And it's so cool because this guy came up with so many other amazing inventions. We don't think about our vaporizers for ISO and SIVO. Back in the day when they were using all the other, it's like not formaldehyde. The stuff that in the movies I can't think of
Yeah, yeah.
those things. So they would just randomly put gas on people till they fall asleep to do surgery. So that's when they started using anesthetics and things like that. But they found that people were either at a good plane of anesthesia or they weren't at a good plane of anesthesia and were waking up screaming, or they would die. It was very random. It appeared to be very random. But he went to watch these people having surgeries because they would be public spectacles.
Yeah.
And he noticed a pattern. And the ones in areas where it was more hot because they had a fire going next to it, those people were more likely to die. The cooler ones were more likely to wake up. So he developed a system where you could control the temperature, which controlled the amount of gas coming in. And by doing that, he basically piped the gas through a tube that went down into water where you control the temperature of the water and comes out, so that you can basically dose, you could have a dose dependent
Yeah.
system by changing the temperature of the water. And so it became a lot more controlled. And so this guy actually gave us the precursor to our vaporizers.
Fascinating.
Yeah, great book though.
You're such a scientist. Look at you.
My brain. I like my science brain sometimes.
I absolutely love that. We talked a little bit leadership, we talked a little bit technicians, and I think we talked a whole lot of vet med. And I appreciate you and I thank you, and I'm sure we will talk again.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your time and for having me as a guest on your podcast. It's always so great chatting with you. I always feel like I learn so much, and you ask very thought provoking questions, which I always appreciate having conversations with people like that because it makes my brain happy.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Leading Veterinary Teams on Air. If this episode hit home, share it with a colleague, tag us on Instagram or TikTok, or leave a review. And don't forget to subscribe. It helps more leaders like you find their way. And remember, your job is not to do it all, it's to lead in a way that lasts. I'll see you next time.